This video is a second in a series that I'm doing on template analysis, which is a type of research data analysis. This video will go through its use and also the underlying philosophy that guides template analysis. The two relevant resources to look at are both by King and Brooks. And they are, because they pioneered this method based on extensive research into business and organizational research. So although in terms of the use of template analysis, although, as I just mentioned, the authors related the use of template analysis to business and management research, nonetheless, these are still useful to know. So in terms of the types of data, the approach can be used with any kind of textual data. So data in the form of written words like interviews, face-to-face interviews using semi-structured formats seems to be the standard approach, usually accompanied with a topic guide that highlights the areas the researchers want to cover. This guide is used flexibly while allowing participants to elaborate and lead the interview process. Other data types include qualitative questionnaires, either paper or online, observational fields, field notes, and documentary analysis. So this method could be used with different types of data, which is great. Template analysis can also be used with different types of study design. So the approach is not restricted in the type of study design within which it can be used. It can be used in cross-sectional design, longitudinal studies, mixed methods, and other types, whichever study design you decide to carry on with. It can be used in, also attention needs to be paid to whether the intention is to do intergroup comparisons or not, as this will affect whether the analysis becomes based on producing a single template that represents all participants, so different groups, versus separate templates where there are differences between groups. A substantial degree of commonality in experiences and concerns across groups usually warrant the use of a single template, just so you are aware. And finally, template analysis can also be used in different research settings and topics. So the style has been used in many areas of the natural and social sciences, including health, and it covers different and diverse topics. Now let's discuss the philosophical orientation that template analysis comes under. So the approach is not confined to any one methodology or underlying philosophy. Because template analysis is considered a generic type, there is no attachment with a specific, or say it's not wedded to a certain methodology. But because of this generic nature, knowing your philosophical stance, that is your epistemology and your ontology, becomes really critical and very needed. In relation to qualitative approaches, for your information, King and Brooks say that because these are generally founded on interpretivism, understanding would typically underlie interpretive research, where exploring meaning becomes prioritized over establishing causal relationships. King and Brooks also discussed and distinguished between 4 different categories of philosophical positions that could be adopted with template analysis. These include qualitative neo-positivist, limited realist, contextualist, and radical constructionist. These are derived from 3 main positions, which are realism, relativism, and the in-between, which is critical realism. Let's talk about 2 of these categories mentioned by King and Brooks, so you get an idea of how this data analysis method fits with these philosophical positions. So let's talk about, I've chosen limited realism and contextualism, and these are included under table 2.1 and page 17 of their book from 2017. So in relation to limited realism, It refers to a range of associated philosophical positions, including critical realism, natural realism, subtle realism, and other types. They are all committed to a realist ontology with a constructivist epistemology, where reality always exists in the world outside of human constructions of it. But our understanding of this world is always limited by where we stand in it. This approach is always associated with creating causal explanations of social phenomena and aims for some degree of generalizability, so generalization. It also seeks to develop theory. Another thing to bear in mind is that reflections of what they call in research reflexivity is still important to acknowledge during the analysis, as we can never remove our subjective opinions, our subjectivity, as researchers, while we are doing our analysis. Let's discuss another philosophical position mentioned by King and Brooks, which is the contextualist position. This position considers context as an integral part to understanding how people experience and understand their lives. For this reason, knowledge obtained through research is always conditional and context dependent or specific in historical, cultural, and social terms. There is no single reality that exists out there, and all accounts obtained are subjective. It is therefore not sustainable to think about knowledge as being value-free and universal. Neither it is meaningful or appropriate to impose or measure objectivity or reliability. Any data obtained is understood to being part of a broader existence, grounded in participants' experiences and social context. Because of that, there is a strong constructivist stance towards ontology and epistemology. Although the constructionist position is less strongly relativist than the radical constructionist position. Under Table 2.1 of their book from 2017, King and Brooks made the assertion that ontology within this position is described by the authors as relativist or indeterminate, with a constructivist or relativist epistemology. King and Brooks say that from a contextualist position, there are always multiple interpretations to be made of any phenomena, and these interpretations will depend upon both the specific social context of the research and the position of the researcher. And this quote was taken from page 20 of their book. When using template analysis, the researcher is viewed as, you as a researcher, is viewed as playing an active role rather than a bystander or a possible source of bias. Also, it's important to bear in mind that multiple interpretations of the data will need to be considered when using this technique instead of one correct reading, and that the interpretation made in the research will therefore depend on your position as the researcher and the particular social context of the research. Now, as mentioned in both of the previous philosophical positions, researcher subjectivity is integral, which is normally accepted and welcomed with these, philosophical positions that I just talked about. This is because empathy and common cultural understandings conveyed through our shared humanity are considered important and they are considered valuable. As a result, there is some expectation to cover questions like the following. So if you are researching, if you decided to celebrate, subjectivity, you decided it's okay to be subjective because of, the philosophical position that you're following. These questions would help you reflect over your conduct as a researcher and your subjectivity. So King and Brooks suggested asking these questions and reflecting on them, perhaps whether outside or inside your thesis, or your study even. The first one is, what was the nature of your involvement as a researcher in the research process? How did your involvement shape the outcomes of the research? How does your own assumptions about the research topic influence the way you formulated your research questions, the issues you highlight in your interview topic guide? Do you have strong views or expectations with regards to the research topic? And finally, why did you use certain data collection methods versus others, like, for example, interviews versus focus groups, photo voice, or any other methods, for example? And finally, how do you become a reflexive researcher? So you attending to reflections, to reflexivity can still be achieved in contextualist work using template analysis through multiple ways. And King and Brooks suggested 2 ways, which are included on this slide. One of them is using independent coding by different researchers, which is common, say if you've got a massive research project, multiple researchers could do the analysis. Or you could use an audit trail, which I've used myself, by documenting and using a documentary record of the steps that you've undertaken, as well as the decisions you've made along the way. No matter how you address your subjectivity, you should always still check whether you are capable of stepping outside of your subjective position as a researcher, because you may be strongly involved in the subject you are studying. So perhaps my suggestion is that it may be useful if you say you are a student. Keep asking your supervisors about your subjectivity throughout your analysis stage. So hopefully this video gave you an understanding of the use and underlying philosophy of template analysis.